So Lu, maybe tell us about your journey in early career in corporate and why you make the decision to jump.
So hi everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Last time I was here, actually, I was in my role as a mentor for Google Launchpad. So very excited to be back. To give you a little bit of background about my sort of past and professional life. So as Xiaochen, I'm Chinese, and when you grow up as a Chinese child, you have a lot of expectations, from your family that you sort of need to fulfill to have, a good life, or to be deemed successful. So my parents always wanted me to, go either into business or into law or into medicine. Right, and so I chose business and did business school in Germany. So I was born in China and then grew up in Germany, got all my education in Germany, went to business school in Germany and started with McKinsey in Munich almost 9 years ago. Asian genes. So I started working with McKinsey, then moved on to join P&G and worked in Switzerland in brand management and marketing. And I've done that for about 4 or 5 years in total. And then I sort of jumped just kind of became my own person, if that makes sense. Kind of embarked on this path of being an entrepreneur and trying to find out what I want to do on my own. And the reason for that, to answer the question actually, is I don't think you ever actually leave a company. I think you leave a manager. Think about that. And in my case, it was kind of, I had difficulties with the boss I was reporting to. I also saw that he had difficulties with the boss that he was reporting to. So if you kind of think about the whole sort of reporting chain, it just doesn't basically work out. And you're like, oh my God, this is a dead end. And, it was not possible basically for me to maneuver in any way in that sort of situation. And I just basically had to leave the company to kind of like find something new. And as I thought, okay, I need to remove myself out of this situation. Do I want to join another corporate, or do I take the opportunity to do something on my own? And that was 5 years ago, and I decided to do something on my own because I'm one of these people who think I can do things better than other people. And so I embarked on that journey.
Yeah, do you ever wish you could maybe quit it earlier on, or this is the exactly good timing for you to do so?
I think it was the right time. I don't think there's ever the best time to leave a job, right? You just feel it. I mean, when you are frustrated enough, and in my case, you'll do it. Or if there's a big enough other opportunity that lures you in, then you'll do it, right? I think every decision that people make, then it's kind of like if it comes from the heart, it's kind of like you're fully behind it, then it is the right time for you, right? And for me, it was definitely the right time. I don't think I should have done it earlier or later. So I don't regret that I sort of jumped, 5 years ago. I think what I would say though is because I was in Switzerland. I was actually in Germany as an expat, and then I moved back to Switzerland. And I was not really part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem because there was none. I think knowing that, sort of being in London and having so many things around you, I think is definitely helpful to immerse yourself even while you're employed in these activities. I mean, we run a lot of things also over the weekends, events and all of that. So I think that's one thing I wished I would have had, but I didn't have it at the time, so there was no choice.
Cool. And after you quit, do you naturally directly go to entrepreneurship, or you take some time to figure out what you want to do, and how long does that take?
So, I left with the vision to do something on my own. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I suppose, wanted to do something that leverages my strength and do something that I'm passionate about and I love, right? And I think that's what a lot of people think about when they sort of, quit a job. And then it's about actually sort of finding out whether the idea that you have is a viable business or can be a viable business, and it's also a business that you want to actually build, because if you're working for a big company, you have all the infrastructure that you can dream of, right? I mean, buildings and food and assistants and telephones and all of these things that you have to take care of yourself when you work for yourself, right? And people find out that you like certain things, or you are better at certain things than others. And so before I started Blooming Founders, I had 2 other companies, which I ran by myself, also almost as a one-woman show. And I learned through that process, I did that for about 3 years, well, 2.5 years, that I don't want to build a company that just has me, right? as a one person, right? Because obviously you can trade your time for money, and then you can just kind of consult in a capacity, and you can pay your rent, you can pay your expenses, and that's kind of it. But I just realized by doing that after a while that I had the ambition, or this I wasn't satisfied myself, so I wanted to build something bigger, more sustainable, with more impact. And that I couldn't have known in the beginning. It's kind of, I think, if you're taking the leap and then trying to find out what you want to do, I think it's very, very natural that you're doing different things, trying different projects, and find out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. It takes time.
Good. And how does the book idea come along? Before you answer, I just want to ask audience a question. How many of you guys still write handwriting letters to anyone around the world? Just hands up if you still do that. Cool. Feel
nice.
To families, to friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
How many people keep a journal actually? How many people write to themselves? A bit more. Good.
I wonder, do they write in English or in your mother tongue, native language? It's quite intimate to write a letter to someone. So how does the idea come around for you?
So the book idea is it was one of the first projects I released for, sort of under my new company, Blooming Founders. I started completely, sort of from scratch. The idea was to kind of build an infrastructure for female founders, because as I was out there doing stuff on my own, I realized that a lot of other women are out there doing stuff on their own. And then if you're in a startup ecosystem, you see no women. So you're kind of trying to square up what's happening here, right? And it seems to me that there's a lot of women around, but there's no infrastructure that they go to apparently, and I didn't know why that was happening. So I started, running events, bringing women together that are entrepreneurial, inviting female founders as speakers, and sort of doing talks, and it's exactly what you're doing, with 90% women in the audience. And I'm so glad that we have a lot of guys in here. I'm really, really glad, because obviously, the title was Dear Female Founder, so, wasn't expected. So yay, guys. So coming back to the story, so I started doing events, and at these events you obviously network after the event, and you find out over time that that there are no role models, or very few role models that women have in entrepreneurship, that the media talks about the typical sort of people, such as Elon Musk, such as Mark Zuckerberg, such as Larry Page, and all of these people are all great people, but they are not us. It's just different, basically. It's not the same. And this book came about from my view of, I think there's so many amazing women out there, because I invited them to speak at my events, that we need to share more content, and we also need to share more authentic content. Not me going out and interviewing people, which I could have done, but I'm not a trained journalist. I don't even know what to ask, basically. I can answer questions, but, So that's how I came up with the idea of writing a letter, because I think it's quite a powerful tool. Yeah. And also it digs out, tacit insights from those entrepreneurs that they probably would have never been prompted by a journalist, right? Because who knows what's in your head, right?
Exactly.
So that's the long story to how this came about.
Yeah, and when you're collecting all these 66 different letters from the female founders, is there any particular one you like impressed you the most, or something you never expected?
Yeah, I got asked question asked a lot. So there's 66 letters in that book. So there's quite a few amazing women that got featured, and I have several favorites for different reasons. I think people that are just super practical, and just kind of like just when you kind of read this, you go, oh my God, yes, of course, like. I should do this, you know, and then people that are a bit more reflective, and it takes a bit longer to process, basically. And sometimes, I had to like read. I had to read because I edited the whole thing, but I had to read letters several times to understand what what's behind. And so I do have my favorite letters for different reasons, I think, and. If you probably I can probably say like the first one of each chapter, so I have 3 larger sections in the book. Probably the first one that I put was kind of like one of the favorites. And the last one is quite powerful as well, actually. Yeah.
Cool. Can't wait to read the whole book. I think you guys are probably thinking the same. And when you founding your business, do you find this advice give you good reason to hold on to it? Have you ever experienced some of the failures or hard time, and how do you cope with it?
Yeah, I think that's just business reality, right? I mean, if anybody thinks that when you start up your own business, it's going to be A to B, like forget it, it's not going to happen. So there's naturally up and downs, and then I think sort of. Reading all of these articles and letters, I think there's just a lot of things that are just very real. I think just one of the things it just springs to mind. But don't work with idiots. Yeah, nobody tells you that, but don't work with idiots. Very simple. And it, I say it's simple, but it's actually not, because sometimes you are in situations where you have to work with people that you actually don't like, for example, and then it can drag a lot of energy and time out of you. And sometimes, like the boldest move you can actually make is actually stop working with these people, even if you have to say no to money, right? And cash flow is obviously important, always. But sometimes it's just very deliberating not to work with certain people, right? And I know that from the community, obviously I produced the book for the Blooming Finance community. I know that some people have it next to their bedside table, and then, when they have like a shitty day, then, oh, can I swear actually? I don't know. When they have like a bad day, they would sort of dip into the book, and then they would, sort of be motivated again, et cetera, because, life happens.
That's true. So when you on your entrepreneur journey, do you have mentors? Do you have like good mentor, bad mentor, and how do you know at that time that's a bad advice for you? How do you know it?
So I believe, if you don't know, I think it's good to just kind of listen to a lot of different opinions, and then you have to just make up your mind yourself, basically, of what you listen to, and just align with your gut, like who do you trust most, right? And because most of the time you ask, don't listen to people who tell you something and you actually find out they've never done it themselves, right? We know too many of those people, and there's a lot of mentors and advisors also in the startup world that have never done anything themselves, but then they are going around and advising people, right? And so that be careful about. And over time, I think the good mentors and advisors, they would actually sort of follow up with you because they like you and they really want to support you. So with most of my current mentors, I wouldn't even call them mentors because we almost became friends, right? I have everyone on WhatsApp, and if I have any questions, basically, right, I just basically ping them a message, and then I see what they say, and then I think, oh, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, or and then I just move on.
Cool. I think I read a research or another interview you did. In UK, there's around 75% of the female founders, they are also solo founders, so they don't have co-founder and all by themselves. What do you think can be done to change the reality, or what caused that, and what things we can do?
So I think the reason behind this is probably not that easy to explain. I mean, there's multitudes of things. I mean, there's research, for example, that women in business and in general have a smaller network, but a deeper network. And men in business have a wider network and more shallow network, which means that they know basically more people. And then societally, also men tend to not shy away from just picking up the phone and call up a mate to ask him a favor or to ask him to do something, whereas women tend not to do that basically because they are aware it's risky and they don't really want to drag another friend into like the whole thing before they are 100% certain it's perfect and it's totally safe to do, which obviously it never is.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of women in the community, including founders, are solo founders because they choose that path of XYZ reason. Could be because they were frustrated in their previous job, because they're really passionate about this idea that they have, but they are they at that time when they had the idea there was nobody else around that was similarly passionate or that they knew for long enough to kind of be a co-founder.
Yeah.
But then sort of people venture out and then they try to find a co-founding team, and that becomes really difficult as well because you don't obviously know the people, and then people might take advantage of you and all of these things. So I think it's a multitude of reasons why women tend to build businesses on their own. Said this though, luckily we still have women founding teams, the mixed teams as well that build great businesses. But I think the overall sort of landscape is unfortunately still that way. And I hope through the work that we do. So we recently opened a physical space, a physical work and event space called Blooms London. So it's a co-working space / event space / members club. And I think the members club element comes through bringing the community together, right? Connecting you with other women that do, similar things in business but have different businesses, and you can collaborate and then you can form teams that might not be sitting under one company but at least are sort of like associated in a way, so you're not working on your own.
So maybe slightly outside the topic, in corporate we're always talking about work-life balance. We have yoga, we have lunch here, as you know. Once you become an entrepreneur and you used to be in this environment, how do you adjust yourself and how do you keep the balance?
I think balance is it's an interesting question, actually. I think balance is a personal choice. I think everybody needs to get to know their own bodies better and understand, are you a morning person, are you a night person, what person are you normal, regular sort of working hours person, and what do you need in your life basically, right? So when I left the corporate, what I've done is actually I wiped out my schedule, like 9 to 5 or whatever, and also Monday to Friday because I had 7 days right in the week, and I'm not sure if you probably know like this I'm not sure what it was, but like this there's this story about this professor in a university, and he comes up with like these 2 vases and like stones and sand, and then he talks up to his students about, I think it's about time management or something, and he puts in like the stones into the vase, and then the sand into the vase, and then the stones, and it doesn't fit basically, it kind of overflows, and then he puts the stones first and then the sand around it, and then everything fits perfectly. And I think there was the analogy around making sure you put the priority, like you have the priorities in check and your ducks in a row. But I think that's what I've pretty much done with my schedule, with my time. So I wiped everything out and I say, okay, I need to sleep like 7 hours a day. So where do I plot that in? I actually tend to sleep between 1 and 8, for example, and I work the best actually between 10 and 1 because that's like my quiet time. I plotted that in. Then friends, I see them for brunch, for drinks or whatever, like need to call my mom, like all of these things basically. But somehow actually I realized I had a really simple life, so I don't have that many stones to put in. Which as a result, the rest basically was sand for me, and my business is sand basically, right? It's kind of everything else that I create in my life, and that's my definition of work-life balance, because if there's a stone coming, right? I mean, I would basically sort of make that stone sort of work somehow, and just remove the sand a little bit, right? So
that's good.
Maybe that helps.
Yeah, I'll ask one more question and I'll open up to the floor. The Googlers are really good with questions. Just be prepared. So what advice would you give to founders out there? Doesn't matter male or female, what would you say to them?
I would actually say like the advice that you find in this book is applicable to everybody, right? I mean, it just comes from a female perspective because that person happens to be a woman, right? But I think my general advice is to do it, to explore whether entrepreneurship is for you. There's literally nothing to lose. I mean, if you think, maybe you lose a bit of money, fine. I mean, you can, join another company and earn money again, right? But, like the time is not lost because you learn so much and it's so different actually to how corporate life works. And you also get to know yourself actually a lot better. So I think entrepreneurship, is a really good way to get for personal development. And some people succeed, great. Some people don't, but then they realize actually, I don't have to build a business. I'm actually much more happier because sometimes you don't know what you have until you actually get rid of it and lose it basically, right? And some people actually I know are very happy back in a job and still do, what they did on the side as a hobby basically. Yeah. But then at least you feel a lot more comfortable and at ease that, this is how I want to design my life now, right? I mean, it's not a constant state, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, great. So now open up to the floor. If you have questions, just raise your hand. I'll give you a microphone. So we'll start from there.
Tell me about the process of writing the book. In terms of selecting the founders, how you pitch it, how you convince them to separate a time to write this really intimate letter. You gave them a deadline. Did you have to do much chasing? Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So it took me about 9 months from having the idea to actually holding the book in my hand. So it's self-published through Amazon. Everybody can self-publish a book. And so it took me in total 9 months. And I started with the women that I knew, that I have invited to speak at my events. And I think the criteria was that they had to be, they must have achieved something interesting, basically, and significant. So I had they had to be in business for at least 3 years. And ideally, there's many employees or raised that much funding or have generated this much revenue. So all of the 66 all together, they've generated, $1 billion in revenue, right? And some obviously more than others, but, And so I leveraged my own personal network. Then I have asked them basically to kind of refer me to other women because, it's a small group of people, so then people tend to know other people. I have also reached out through, the Google network, the sort of accelerator networks, Startup Weekend. So I volunteer for Startup Weekend and organize Startup Weekends, and Startup Weekend is around the globe. And that I utilized after I have pretty much gotten 20 people in around London and the US, which are pretty much the first people you get because it's kind of the density is there. But I really wanted to have a global perspective. So you have people from New Zealand, China, and Colombia and Mexico and things. So for that I had to sort of tap to other networks, and Startup Weekend is an amazing network. So everybody's so helpful and helping you to connect. And also my business school friends, because they are everywhere in the world now. So from Dubai to Indonesia to everyone, so be hi, and so that's how I kind of reached out. I think I also tried LinkedIn and just LinkedIn connections and messages. That was the least effective, but I got a couple through that. And how I approached them was I actually wrote a letter myself as a example, right? And I gave them quite specific sort of, I suppose, directions, right? So it started with Dear Female Founder, because that's the title of the book, and everything started with Dear Female Founder. It has to be between 800 and 1,500 words. So it also communicates, it's not too long. Yeah, you're not asking to write a book, but just a letter. And basically think about, if you were to sit down and write a letter, what would you advise to your younger self, or your best friend who is starting a business, and or the future generation of female founders, right? And I think that idea just resonated a lot with the people that contributed, that everybody was just so happy to do it, and they were like, oh my God, I always wanted to do that. It's like, good that you're giving me the chance, and I got actually a lot of gratitude back from people, because people were like, actually, thank you for helping me to find my voice and my story and to tell my story, because I've never done that before, because I was never asked, because that comes to the original problem, because they were never asked, right? So I think somehow the idea just resonated. Pretty much everybody had a positive response. Probably half the people I've contacted, so I contacted around like 150 people, said, it's lovely, I would love to contribute, but I'm so super busy that I just don't have time. But let me know when it's out, and I would love to support and spreading the word or something.
Cool. So just go around. Do they also post it to you, like write it and stamp it?
No. Oh yeah. So Google Docs, guys.
Yeah.
So it's, to be honest, like the actual my work was really just project management, because you're just you create your hit list, you contact them, you see what they say, right? There's everything in Excel or Google Sheets, and then literally I would just ask people to send me a Google Doc, right? And then I would edit it in the Google Doc with them, and every letter probably had like between 3 to 5 sort of like rounds of feedback, and then and that's it. Right, you sign off, that's the text, you copy it further, and that's done.
It's good to know.
Thanks for sharing your story. So you mentioned that the letters are from sort of a global base.
Yeah.
So you spoke to people and had contributions from all over the world.
Yeah.
What proportion of the letters were from sort of the US versus Europe versus Asia in general? And did you notice any trends, like themes of different types of challenges that people faced in North America versus what perhaps they faced here or in APAC?
So I think around, I forgot the numbers to be honest, but around 20 people are actually from the UK. Another like 15 or so are from the US. So like probably half of the book is kind of UK, US. And then the rest is kind of like across the globe, right? And at some point I was just literally keen on having somebody in Africa, for example, right? And I think in terms of the advice that people, I also had like entrepreneurs that, for example, did stuff in Sierra Leone, but were actually Americans, for example, right? So it's a bit, But I think in terms of advice, I think it really depends more on the type of business and the industry that they were in than the actual country. I do see basically, in the Asian sort of like sphere, there is more cultural expectations around the topic of entrepreneurship, because it's not something that women do, to be honest. And then in terms, and it's funny because I think the girl from Latin America, or the lady actually, she's a scientist. She's like heavy like science stuff. She kind of was interesting because she's doing this like super serious thing, and then like her letter was kind of like really bubbly, So that's where I felt that in the way that she was writing, that the Latin American sort of flavor came out a little bit. But that's just kind of like from an editing perspective. From a content perspective, I would say I was surprised to see that probably only like 5 to maximum 10% of what people talk about is actually genderized, is actually sort of about like, as a female founder, like most of the things are really just super, applicable across everything. So I found that quite interesting because, I didn't give them a more specific brief than I shared with you just now, and people were not, oh my God, I'm a female founder, I'm so discriminated, and the world is so horrible, etc. You obviously have that, but in the grand scheme of things, I think probably also people just don't want to share that back to the future generation, right? I think we want to be more positive about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you've mentioned that as women we don't have as many role models in terms of CEOs. There are female out there.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if there were any common topics in the book and the letters about women feeling a bit like the imposter syndrome. In Google sometimes they talk about, I'm not sure if I should be here or if I deserve to be here. So I was just wondering, with women being CEOs, if they talked about anything about, I cannot believe I'm a CEO, or things like that.
Yeah, they do. And I think what did come out, I think what makes a difference that women wrote those letters is a little bit of that, but a lot of about taking care of yourself kind of thing, and being true to yourself, and not, trying to do something just because the rest of the world wants you to do it, right? So for example, I mean, the typical startup acceleration phase is, you start a startup, you get you go through an accelerator, you get your seed funding, you get your Series A and B and so forth, right? And it requires a certain type of business to do that and actually sort of perform against all of these metrics, but it might not be the best business, and it might not be the best business for you as well, right? So people pivot, right? And then sometimes it's kind of like, am I doing the wrong thing of having graduated from a Texas accelerator, for example, and now pivoting into an agency, for example, right? That might be super profitable because we're really good at what we're doing, but isn't the high growth tech business that people thought that we were doing in the beginning, right? And I think letting go and sort of like, sort of that type of attachment, you can read a little bit through the book, and also then, attach to that because it's very stressful, obviously, to just be okay with yourself, to say, okay, I am in that game, or I am in a different game, and I'm totally fine with being in a different game, right? And to the sort of the imposter syndrome thing. So that's actually in the first letter, written by a lady called Alexandra Diplech from Hassel.com. She exited Hassel a couple years ago, and now she's building her second startup called BuildPath. And she has, one of her tips for that is when you sort of have an important meeting, important presentation, you go to the bathroom, you look into the mirror, and you say, I am the shit to yourself, right? And then you go back up. And then it's all good. So things like that,
Cool.
So what is the next step for you from here?
So, you know what? The book was literally something, I didn't have any motives behind the book, to be honest, right? I published it because I felt the content was needed, and I was engaging with the community at the time. So for me, I'm obviously super happy to promote the book all the time because I think it's valuable content to share. But I'm not Simon Sinek, basically, right? There's no gigantic other thing that is kind of coming behind the book. It's literally just kind of for the universe, really. And so my business is around building this infrastructure for female founders, right? And the book is obviously one element. It's one product that you can get, and the other product the thing that I want to scale is this online to offline sort of infrastructure that includes the online community where you can make connections and share knowledge and experiences, plus then sort of seeing everybody in real life in those co-working spaces that I'm creating, right? So that's kind of sort of the business that I'm looking to build, and at the moment we have the first one in Old Street, and we're looking to kind of then grow that and open more spaces in West London. I'm actually thinking about Bali, because why not? Who doesn't want to work in Bali, right? and other locations, yeah.
We're gonna do one more question, and then, cool.
Yeah.
Hi Lou, thank you for joining. This is truly amazing, something that I would dream to publish, but I'm glad you beat me to it. The question I have for you is, were there anyone or any founders that you reached out to where you thought, they might never respond, and when they did, you were kind of nervous, or like, oh my God, they actually responded? Like a Sheryl Sandberg, or?
Yeah, I did try to reach out with Sheryl Sandberg, but didn't get far enough, I suppose. I think, I don't know. It's a difficult question to answer because personally honestly think that every woman who has achieved something almost has a moral obligation to do that. So therefore, I think that when people responded positively, I was like, yes, you get it. Awesome. Let's do this. Right? Like, I wasn't me like, oh my gosh, she accepted this, it's so amazing. It's fine. I mean, I think, because in that way, I mean, I felt a bit entitled, if that makes sense, in a non sort of like, I think you must do this kind of thing. But I actually genuinely think that successful people have a moral obligation to share their knowledge with the future generation. So I was generally happy that they got it, and they were supporting me on that journey, and I think I was also I think what I was surprised about is actually the surrounding support, right? So one thing I forgot to mention is actually I also had a nomination process to find interesting women, and a lot of people actually use that because sometimes you don't know the women yourself, but their previous PA or their marketing manager, is now like a female founder herself, and then she knows me, so she would sort of like, suggest her previous boss and stuff like that. So that I actually felt was really nice. But that got me like, oh, it's really exciting. I didn't know you were doing, So yeah.
Cool, great. So thank you, Luli, for sharing the experience and the book, and thank you everyone for coming and all the good questions. I hope you guys enjoy the book.
Yeah.
And feel free to maybe ask Luli afterwards for a few questions and sign the book if you want. So yeah, see you guys next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.